1954. Ian Fleming published the first of his iconic spy series with these words: "The scent and smoke and sweat of a casino are nauseating at 3 in the morning. Then the soul erosion produced by high gambling, a compost of greed and fear and nervous tension, becomes unbearable, and the senses awake and revolt from it." So, sounds delightful. Little would he know that it would spawn the longest-running film series in the world. Today, we'll look at the literary Bond through the lens of PCZ TV. Today's episode: booze, bullets, and never mind. The British Film Institute is adding trigger warnings to the Bond movies. They feel that the attitude towards women in these movies isn't necessarily aligned with current values. What they should be doing is giving trigger warnings for this video as I attempt pronunciations and, worse yet, bad English accents. Well, you have been warned. And given the current environment, I'll just leave any discussion of birds to James Bond. Welcome, friends, to my Bond series. We'll look at Bond as Ian Fleming imagined him. Fleming's lens was through his life as a bit of an upper-class bon vivant, playboy, and a product of the British public school system. It could be argued that the character of James Bond is really an idealized version of himself, a bit of a Mary Sue, if you will. After all, Fleming and Bond shared similar loves of gambling and golf and cigarettes, lots of cigarettes, the same brand, and the same voracious appetite for cigarettes. They even shared a love of their favorite food, scrambled eggs. Scrambled eggs? Well, all right. Anyway, given Fleming's history, I don't think that anyone would argue that he wasn't indeed well acquainted with booze and booze. But what about guns? Let's dive deeper into Fleming and Bond. According to Ben McIntyre, Fleming himself claimed that Bond, quote, was really a compound of all the secret agent and commando types I met during the war, unquote. Well, that seems like a group of folks well acquainted with firearms, and, in that regard, it makes sense to just review the wartime experiences of Ian Fleming. So, what specifically was Fleming's war like? Fleming was commissioned into the Royal Naval Reserve, working in the intelligence section, and eventually ending his service in 1952. He did not see action, as they said. He wasn't on the front lines, and he did not carry a firearm. So, while he was in a bit of the cloak and dagger side of the war, he wasn't at the pointy part of the spear. Before we move on, I think it's important to understand Fleming and Bond within the overall context of the time it was written. Wartime austerity didn't end with VE Day. The war had ravaged the losers and, with the exception of the United States, also the winners. Britain ended the war with a £21 billion debt. They were essentially bankrupt. Post-war, Britain's empire was dissolving, and their ability to repay the debt put severe strains on their economy. In fact, they only repaid the loan to the United States in 2006. So let's put this in perspective. Travel was restricted for the immediate post-war period, and food rationing was only phased out by 1954. So I guess scrambled eggs, as a luxury item, does make sense, relatively speaking. The other aspect of England were their firearm laws. In America, the Second Amendment preserved the rights of individuals to own firearms. England is quite different. Starting roughly around 1903, laws started to be passed on private ownership of firearms, with each successive law getting stricter and stricter. Timing-wise, so that's why Sherlock Holmes and Watson were able to own revolvers. They predated a lot of the coming strict regulations. back to the early 50s. So within this context, we can see why a glamorous character like Bond had such appeal. Folks could live vicariously through the character. It wasn't just Fleming's Mary Sue. Now, back to the point of this video. What did Fleming know about booze and bullets? And what does his selection about those items in the novel say about him? Well, booze, I'm pretty sure we don't need to check his credentials. Gun-wise, I have seen unconfirmed statements saying that Fleming was a firearm enthusiast and actually owned a Beretta 418. But realistically, he knew of and apparently owned firearms, but wasn't an enthusiast per se. In his correspondence with Geoffrey Boothroyd, Fleming announced that he had, quote, a valid firearm certificate number 109950, unquote. But he also embraced the ideas and firearm recommendations of Boothroyd. In May of 1956, Fleming stated, "You have entirely convinced me, and I propose to change his weapons in accordance with your instructions. Oh, incidentally, can you suggest where I can see a .38 caliber airweight in London? Who would have one?" Well, that sounds more like a man vaguely familiar with firearms. So let's take a look at the booze and bullets of James Bond, as told in the books, and provide my inappropriate commentary. Okay. Well, given what I just said, I'll break this study into two eras, pre-Boothroyd and post-Boothroyd. Boothroyd had a major, pun intended, impact on Fleming's writings, so it's only natural to use that as a breaking point. In the first video series, we'll try to figure out just what weapons were likely to be used in the books, given Fleming's descriptions and his, shall we say, knowledge base. Well, he certainly does like variety. While famous for a vodka martini, shaken, not stirred, the literary Bond actually had a wide variety of consumption. More the merrier, it seems. Well, pardon me if I just default down to a martini for the rest of this video narration. I'll be sipping a classic vodka martini, made, of course, with quality Polish vodka. Sit back and enjoy. 1953. Casino Royale is published, Bond is introduced, and starts drinking. His first drink? Not a martini. In fact, no martini to be found in this novel. Bond's first drink is an Americano, a combination of Campari, Cinzano, and Perrier with a twist. According to Liquor.com, link in the description, the Americano was first served in the 1860s at Gaspari Campari's bar in Milano. It's believed that the name stems from its popularity among American tourists, and it's possible that the name wasn't affixed until the Prohibition era, when Americans went to Europe in droves. I guess these folks were pretty desperate for a drink. As for me, I've never actually had one. You would think I'd do my homework and run out and sample one, but I didn't. So if you have had one, let me know what you think in the comments below. Next up is the infamous drink of Casino Royale, the Fleming creation of a Vesper, which he later quipped, "I sampled it several months later and found it unpalatable." Well, he's not wrong. They are horrible. But when Bond orders his signature drink from the bartender, he provides very strict instructions on how to prepare the cocktail. A dry martini, 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of Quina Lillet. Shake it very well until it's ice cold. Then add a large thin slice of lemon peel. Liquor.com speculates that it may also serve a broader literary purpose of portraying Bond as a hard-drinking secret agent who chose to take his drinks exceedingly strong and shaken until they were so cold that the alcohol couldn't be felt as it went down. Well, I have had one of these, and I wish it was so cold that the taste didn't go down also. They're horrible. Now, if you're a fan, Do pop in the comments and explain to me what the attraction is, because I totally missed it. Well, in any case, Bond ends on champagne and brandy. Champagne would serve as a repeated touchstone to Bond throughout the various books and movies. Now, I'm not a connoisseur of wine or champagne, and frankly, this vintage is now in the collectible category is way out of my price range. I have toured the Champagne regions of France and the California Napa and Sonoma valleys, and well, I'm a barbarian, and champagne all sorts of tastes the same to me, but Taittinger is famous and well respected, so I say, nah, it's fine. So booze-wise, a rather modest by Fleming standard selection. Turning now to firearms, Fleming equips Bond with a Beretta 25. At this time, it would be the model 418, the same model Fleming allegedly owned. These have become collector items, mainly due to Fleming. Beretta itself has a long history of firearm manufacture, and seems to always have had extensions into smaller pocket-sized firearms, which continues to this day. We're going to spend some time on this firearm as it appears heavily and, in some cases, almost exclusively in Fleming novels. The Beretta 25 was famously derided by Boothroyd as being a lady's gun, and not a really nice lady at that. But was he right? His key point that, quote, he dislikes a man who comes into contact with all sorts of formidable people using a 25 Beretta, unquote. Well, yes, and no. Let's look at this through the prism of the choices at the time. Bond is a secret agent. He's a bit of a peacock and a fashionista. Boothroyd would later recommend a revolver, but the width of a revolver versus an automatic makes discreet carry in the tailored suits that Bond wears difficult. And Fleming was keen not to spoil the cut of Bond's suits. So from a concealment perspective, the small automatic is a great choice. The caliber. The caliber itself is a fascinating discussion. Americans will argue about this all day long. Anything smaller than 9mm is a waste. Of course, I cry when I get a paper cut, so any caliber would be a major emotional moment for me, but I digress. Here's where we get interesting. In the video, The Guns of James Bond, Boothroyd talks about the importance of stopping power. However, in earlier correspondence with Fleming, Boothroyd also said, if Mr. Bond has to use a light gun, we'd be better off with a .22 rimfire. Wait, what? He wants to go to a smaller caliber? Stopping power? I don't get it. All right, let's set this up. Let's unpeel this onion. A quick word on caliber. The number is a function of bullet size, diameter. And to make matters even more confusing, it's provided either in inches or in metric designations. So when Boothroyd derided the 25, but recommended a 22, well, using my quick math, 22 is smaller than 25. But he also talked about stopping power, so let's examine the 25 in more detail. So let's look at the 25. The 25 ACP, automatic Colt pistol, was designed by none other than John Moses Browning. It was designed specifically to mimic the performance characteristics of the .22 caliber round, but it features a semi-rimmed case to enable reliable extraction with an automatic pistol. To this day, .22 caliber rimfire cartridges do not like automatic pistols. So Boothroyd is right insofar as the mythical stopping power of a pistol round goes. Neither the 22 or the 25 rounds are known as one-stop killers. Indeed, Fleming acknowledged as much in From Russia with Love when he had Bond say, "Bit on the lighter side, but it'll kill if you put the bullets in the right places." Indeed, he's right. A 22 or 25 will kill with the appropriate round placement. Another aspect often overlooked is that small pistols are recoil sensitive. Big cartridges out of small pistols equal big recoil. The Beretta is designed for a small cartridge like the .25, so it is reliable and, with a lack of recoil, quite accurate and manageable. A snub-nosed revolver in a large cartridge is painful to fire, and that often translates into poor accuracy, wincing, flinching, missing. Better to hit with a small caliber than miss with a big one. Okay, quick aside. In the real world, the Israeli Mossad spy organization famously used .22 caliber Berettas. But Paul, you say, you just said that .22 isn't reliable. Well, the pistols the Mossad used were later designs than the .418. They used the Beretta Model 70. So, a more modern design, but, for instance, my Walther PPK in .22 is very finicky. It only likes certain rounds and certain brands of ammunition, and has been back to the factory to address issues. But the sensitivity to ammunition is true even for modern .22 rimfire automatics, like the Walther P22. Now, there are advantages to the .22. They can be reliably silenced and, as far as real-world suppressors go, are about as quiet as you can get for a centerfire round. Given that, it makes sense that the uses the Mossad had in mind for them, allegedly, really only needed one close-range shot to achieve their objectives. Not unlike the role of a 00, I might add. But I digress. Let's go back to Bond. Finally, James Bond is a spy. The pistol is not the tool of first resort. He relies on his wits and his banter versus the brute force of a pistol. He is not John Wick. If the mission requires, he can equip himself appropriately, and we can see that in the novels. But by and large, he's more clandestine and needs a much more discreet firearm. In the current day, there are micro 9mm firearms which are small and powerful, but in this era, the Beretta 418 is a damn good choice in my opinion. But the story doesn't end there. Fleming loved imagery, and he had to apply it to the pistol. Bond didn't just have a Beretta. In Casino Royale, we are introduced to the pistol with the vivid description that Bond had a very flat .25 Beretta automatic with a skeleton grip. Well, thanks go out to the Bond Commando website, link in the description, who featured this weapon modification. And this is where we exit the real world and enter the fantasy world. You don't really gain much in the way of decreased thickness by removing the grips on a Beretta. In fact, the way the pistol is designed, by removing the grips you suddenly expose parts of the mechanism. But the skeleton grip line sounds cool, and Fleming used the same description in 2 other novels. My opinion? Well, this is little wonder why Bond's Beretta wasn't reliable. The other modification Fleming spoke of was the filing off of the front sight. Really, this is not an issue. Guns of this era, even full-size military-issued sidearms, had pathetically small sights. You can barely see them anyway. The other aspect to remember was the manual of arms for pistols of this era. The pistol was shot either one-handed or, as Fairburn, a famous commando trainer in England, taught, in a crouched position. This one-hand crouched firing position was adopted by most military and, as shown in this picture, by the FBI of the era. This is a very different from the modern two-handed stance. So the lack of a front sight was actually appropriate for the era. So feel free to file away that sight, young man. So ultimately, I agree with Fleming. The Beretta 418 is a good spy gun. I wouldn't take off the grips, but I get the cool literary imagery of a skeleton grip the description provides. All right, so let's transition over to the first Bond gun actually mentioned in the novels. What? It's not the Beretta? No. It's not the Beretta? It's not the PPK? It's a Colt. His last action was to slip his right hand under the pillow until it rested under the butt of a .38 Colt Police Positive with the sawn barrel. That's another thing you'll see with Fleming. He loves terms like skeleton grip and sawn barrel. Well, to be fair, in this era, the short barrel revolver wasn't terribly common, and as we'll see later, there were many conversions into specials that were done at the factory and afterwards by gunsmiths. The first issue of the Colt Police Positives ran from 1907 to 1927. The second issue ran from 47 and introduced new cartridges with barrel lengths from 2.5 to 6 inches. However, in 1926, a banker's special was introduced with a 2-inch barrel. This is the one I like to think that Bond is fondling under his pillow. Now remember before I said Bond would grab the right tool for the right job? Well, at the end of Casino, Bond got a colleague from our organization in New York and a couple of Remington 3030s with telescopic sights and silencers. Oh, okay. Really? 3030, the round, is usually associated with lever guns. The old cowboy guns. The round itself is an old black powder round that transitioned to the modern smokeless era. Best known as a short-range deer rifle, this is not the sniper rifle I'd choose. Add to this that I can't find any record of a Remington chambered in this round before the Model 788 in 1967. I'm guessing Fleming just loved the sound of the round, 3030, and the word Remington. So were I to fix this, I would suggest using the Remington Model 8. It's in 30 Remington, which essentially is a rimless 3030, and it was commonly used by the police of the era. In fact, its most famous use was by the Texas Rangers in the ambush on Bonnie and Clyde. Okay, we finish off video 1 of Fleming's Bond. Casino was a light pour as far as the booze variety go. Again, let me know about those Americanos and if you actually like Vespers. As far as bullets, we dove deep on the Beretta and took a gander at the Colt and the Remington. Fleming score? Colt revolver? Yes. Beretta 418? Yes. Skeleton grips? No. Filing the sight? Yes. 3030 Remington? No. Overall, I give Fleming mixed marks, but there's the issue of creative license, so what the heck. Ian, no need to turn in Firearms License 109950. Well, at least so far. And if you've made it this far, I thank you. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, cheers. Bye!